His name shall be Dane.
I wonder what kind of man he will grow up to be.
This outward light must be the path to the ultimate light. It has to be.
The lights, we discovered, helps with those wounds left behind in one's spirit.
Hypocrites, all of them.
Let your tears come. I will catch them.
Darkness cannot simply be vanquished, White Mage.
There was no other that came before you.
This is the doing only of gods and mothers. You are neither.
Maplestory the Novel, Season 1, Sacred Tears. Written by Tatsumari Korisuno. Chapter 11, Part 1. Salvation. Days passed without Dane's realization. His recent discovery made Ephania's absence negligible. However, progress felt slow, even with the help of the twins. Attacks by creatures dubbed omens further slowed discoveries as he and the other clerics would battle them back. Ferriman pointed out the increasing ferocity with which the omens attacked. More and more requests and reports would come to the Order, telling of brutal killings by these creatures happening more and more frequently. Taking this data, Dane tried to add it to the concept of the ultimate darkness, but clarity still eluded him. Darkness, in its most basic form, resulted from pain, sorrow, fear, and anger left in a person's soul when they died and seeped into the world.
Then what is the ultimate darkness?
Dane would think, poring over texts, tomes, scrolls, and albums. Pharamond and James helped search dozens upon dozens of books chronicling history from the first epoch, when words were first written, to the present, in the 19th epoch. Dane enlisted the twins' help to speed up the search, all of them gathered in the small library within the cottage. After weeks of work, all three formed the primitive theory that ultimate darkness was the culmination of sorrow and pain from a particularly atrocious event or period in history. As Ferriman climbed a bookshelf ladder, the shelf began to tilt. Orchid covered her head when she saw it falling, appearing across the room. Lotus braced himself for impact. But when nothing happened, he looked up in awe to see the shelf and its contents floating in the air around him. After helping Lotus set the bookshelf upright, the twins could only stare at one another in awe.
It appears that in your human form, you have awakened powers from your forest spirit days.
Orchid's eyes lit up as she began dancing from one foot to the other.
Powers? Like what?
Such as your ability to teleport, or Lotus's ability for telekinesis.
That sounds like so much fun! What else can I do? Can you teach me?
Yeah, that sounds awesome!
Lotus chimed.
I can only assume that you have powers and abilities beyond what I can ever teach you, seeing as you were once forest spirits. You may simply need to remember your powers.
Wait, we had powers before we became human?
Lotus asked.
We could be more powerful than you?
Orchid squeaked.
There is the possibility. Your alteration by the darkness may have suppressed your memory even as a human.
Then can we get our memory back? I don't want to blow myself up.
Lotus asked.
I can attempt to teach you, but I don't know how well it would help you. First, let us continue our search.
The twins disappointedly read on, periodically making books float or turning the pages without touching them. Their search through human history revealed more than Dane was prepared for. The Elven Hunts, elvenkind slaughtered by the thousands, driven to the point of near annihilation in hopes of finding magic by extracting it from them. Only a few hundred remained in the town at the bottom of Heim's tree. It was there they found sanctuary and protection by the deity himself. If elves had any resentment towards humans, they did an excellent job hiding it. The Darless Crusades, blood-soaked campaigns against any, human or not, that opposed or refused to convert to the Church of the Great Mother Minerna. These crusades only stopped when Minerna herself came and disintegrated the High Deacon and declared that anyone using force in her name would be met with the same fate, resulting in the shift to the present teachings. The Cleansing, an event Dane heard of but never thoroughly researched. It was a systematic eradication of sylph and nymph fairies, seen as threats when humans moved into their forests. Now only a handful remained of the once playful race, including Dr. Long's widow Felicia, their daughter Kenny, and the Queen of Arentia. The Mage Gatherings, a decade-long failure that brutally forced kidnapped children to learn magic, which at the time was misunderstood. This practice often resulted in their deaths due to the forced mishandling of magical energies and spells left by elves and fairies. And finally, the Battle of the Rhaegonian slave trade. After 3 decades of the practice going unchecked, Empress Victoria of the Sixth Epoch declared that all slaves were to be freed and returned to their homes at the expense of the owners. When this decree was ignored, the Empress sent her forces to ensure the Rhaegonians would return to their homeland. Instead of a joyous release, every owner throughout Eusoria killed every single Rhaegonian man, woman, and child in their possession. When the owners were brought before the Empress to answer for their atrocity, their only reply was their unwillingness to waste hard-earned money on sending some menial chattel home. Burial would be cheaper. The Empress imprisoned them all, stripping the families of their wealth and status. A well-protected gravesite now stands at the base of the Zakuman Mountains in the northwest region of Al-Neth, guarded by the residents of the Lionheart Castle. Dane sat in silence, the air becoming heavy around him. Some accounts of the slave trade were from angry plantation owners, jailed for the economic assistance they provided to the world. The despair and rage Dane felt simmering in his soul was almost too much to keep under control. Many families who were part of this era still existed. Dane wanted to seek retribution against those families for the atrocities they committed. However, he reasoned that the current generation was so far removed from the event that there would be no justifiable reason to do so. Additionally, none of the Aurora knew what the current generation was like, nor were they sure the families knew about their heritage.
It is not our place to pass judgment. Our mission is to fight back the demons created from events such as this,
he thought as he closed the book and walked to the window, watching the construction of the new Aurora Chapel. Looking back to the book, Dane thought about when he had first begun this journey, talking with his father Maxis.
You said that this research would take you to some very dark places. So far, it seems you haven't even touched on them.
The dark places that I spoke of do exist, Maxis. I was only too ruptured in the light and Andorian I created. I didn't want them to exist. Now the world is becoming all the darker, and I am forced to see it as it truly is. And what contributed to it?
Knowing the darkest sides of humanity, he could begin to understand the ultimate darkness. Through it, he could harness its power for the ultimate light. Visiting these sites, while dangerous, could provide him with a much clearer understanding and accelerate results. Ariel watched her mirror for what seemed like only minutes, realizing that many days had passed on Eusoria. Time flowed much differently in the temple, and she cursed herself for forgetting that fact. Finding the person to take Dane's place needed expediency. The thought made her pull her arms around herself and imagine her life in her Eusorian vessel with Dane. She pulled her arms tighter, imagining that he held her close and kissed her neck as he stood behind her. She missed that. She missed him. She thought back to the previous months, walking to the Hall of the Green and watching the memories she had made. It was a rough journey, to be sure, but the two of them had built love out of that journey. She would do anything to ensure that Dane would stay safe.
Of course! Why didn't I think of this before?
She thought, returning to the mirror and applying a new thought to see what may happen. As before, the two paths of time still existed, but the way to peace and triumph seemed more assured. However, there was a problem that would make the entire idea moot if not resolved.
Goddess Ariel, what troubles you so?
A monk of the green asked, reaching up and removing his smiling mask.
Good monk, tell me, can a mortal be brought to the Temple of Time?
The monk thought for a while, holding his chin as he thought, until a monk of the blue came up and removed his mask.
Bringing a mortal to the temple would mean their certain death. Mortals are bound by the time of Eusoria. There is no way around that. 100 years could pass in Eusoria, and it would be but the passing of a few moments to us.
Ariel cradled her chin, staring hard at the mirror of time once again.
There has to be a way,
she muttered.
What is this I hear about you wanting to bring a mortal to this temple?
Asked a firm but kind voice. The monks immediately donned their masks and bowed low, while Ariel turned around to see her mother Minerna shifting her massive white wings behind her.
Mother!
Ariel called, happily hugging her.
It is good to see you as well, my child. Now, as I asked, what is this I hear about bringing a mortal to the Temple of Time?
Ariel stepped back and motioned to the mirror where time split.
Have you found a way to eliminate this disaster in its entirety?
Minerna asked while looking over the mirror more closely. Ariel shook her head with a heavy sigh.
I have found a way to avert it. But...
Minerna turned to Ariel, pulling her lips to the side with an understanding smirk.
This aversion requires a mortal, does it not?
Ariel nodded her head, walking to the mirror beside Minerna.
Yes. The path to peace requires introducing another mortal to rid the world of darkness. Someone other than Dane. He can learn its intricacies, but he does not have the ability. The power he needs is more than he could muster or channel.
Ariel pointed back to the mirror, where a boy and a girl with silvery blonde hair dressed in form-fitting white robes stood before the split of time. Lowering her brow, Minerna put her gaze back on the mirror.
I'm sorry, Ariel, but I fail to see what a mortal has to do with these children.
With every action introduced before now, the disaster would only accelerate or delay. By introducing one of these children, peace will be achievable. But I must be the mother.
Minerna stepped to the mirror and watched the children more closely.
What I see here are demi-deities. How would you achieve this? And who would you choose?
Ariel breathed heavily, lacing her fingers before her.
I would choose a human by the name of Dane.
The White Mage?
Minerna interrupted.
You know of him?
Ariel asked in surprise. Minerna grinned knowingly and chuckled softly.
I may not visit often, but it does not mean I neglect my children or the happenings of Eusoria,
she said, stepping away from the mirror.
The White Mage has won you over?
He has. This plan must work. I cannot bear to see Dane destroy himself because of this task. The problem lies in the child. My body must be the one impregnated, not the vessel I used to walk in Eusoria,
Ariel explained. Minerna walked to a balcony overlooking the world far below, zeroing in on Ariel's Eusorian body, still asleep in the cottage bedroom.
For that to happen, he needs to come here. Unfortunately, his life is bound to Eusoria's time. He would die, as time flows differently here. And going down to Eusoria in this form would mean dire consequences for the world.
Ariel sighed, half expecting a lecture about how deities and mortals shouldn't mingle, let alone conceive a child together. Minerna's lips curled faintly into a smile, leaning against the railing and sighing contentedly.
Then it appears your path is clear.
When your fires all die out, all you know just turns to ash, and your life goes slipping, spinning into doubt. Sunshine trapped inside your heart, cold and lost and in the dark. Looking back on all this, nobody was there. Nothing left to lose. Gotta find the you that's hidden deep, deep down, and light the fire in yourself. Never be afraid to fall, throw yourself into it. Victory's waiting for you.